Today, we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this January 15, 2018 day. Happy Martin Luther King Day. My name is Dr. Nick Pitts, also known as just Nick. And we are here in studio today for Point of View, our morning edition, here specifically in the Dallas area. And we've got a packed show for you today, a significant show. We hope that you will continue to tune in and join us. We're going to be talking about everything from the mishap in Hawaii that happened over the weekend relative to the alarm that was sent to cell phones, to everything from immigration and some of the DACA issues that are coming out over the weekend, as well as what will be happening in the week, as well as kind of some of the negotiations that are happening up on Capitol Hill, as well as to an interesting story that I found out of Science Daily, talking about how there are researchers now that are hoping to be able to interpret dog barking in order that you can better communicate with your dog. And what does that say about about our country? What does that say necessarily about our yearning for connection and our desire to be able to be needed, as well as to be a resource for others? We will explore that a little more deeply. And then here in the next segment, we're going to be introducing you to probably someone that you're very familiar with. We've got Bunni Pounds, who's running for the 5th Congressional District race. She'll be joining us in studio for 30 minutes from 9:15 to 9:45. And you're going to want to stick around and tune in as we kind of hear more about Bunni and her candidacy, and how she really is trying to be that advocate for faith, freedom, and physical responsibility. I was really excited when I was on her website, and we just highly encourage you to go there as well. You can find that website as well as more information about her before we have her on here in the next little few minutes by going to our website, pointofview.net. And also, as always, we would love to hear your point of view on any of these topics that we'll be talking about today. You can call in, that thing that you used to text, at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. Or you can log on, hop on over to Facebook. I think that Facebook thing is really going to take off here with about 2 billion people. You can go to facebook.com/pointofviewradio, share your comments and questions. We're going to be taking some of those and sharing some of those on air. But without further ado, we have to talk about what was happening in the sports world yesterday, where the world was turned upside down. Being from Tennessee, but now here in Texas. In Tennessee, many of you will remember the Music City Miracle that happened upwards of 9 years ago. And they're calling this the Minnesota Miracle about what happened yesterday. So to give you a kind of a brief view, we've got the Vikings that were down going into the very last play of the game, and Case Keenum, their quarterback, threw this pass. And when he threw the pass, he was able to complete this over 60-yard pass in order for the Vikings to be able to win. No, everyone is talking about it right now. But I was so captivated by the radio call. And so I want you to listen to this excerpt and feel the excitement as these Vikings announcers tell us word by word what happened on that play.
10 seconds to go. 24-23 Saints. Vikings at their own 39. It's third down. 3 receivers right, Thielen left. Marshawn Lattimore 12 yards from Adam. Case on a deep drop. Steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Caught by Diggs. Stay on 30. No way. Touchdown! Are you kidding me? It's a Minneapolis miracle. Stephon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings have walked off on the New Orleans Saints. It's a 61-yard Minneapolis miracle. I can't believe what I just saw, Paul Allen. What an unbelievable play.
And I couldn't believe what I just saw either, as the Vikings ended up winning 29-24. To give you a glimpse, I was on a plane actually flying back to Dallas. I'm a Titans fan through and through, came here to do grad work. And so as I'm on this plane, they're playing the game. You have access to the game, and there's probably about half of us on the flight that are watching this. And I have never been on a plane where everyone got so excited but had so little interest whatsoever in the Vikings. There was no Vikings vested interest in these individuals. We were just all so excited to participate in this crazy moment where the Vikings would end up defeating and upsetting, for many, the Saints 29-24. And probably one of the most interesting headlines that came out of the day was the New Orleans paper. The New Orleans paper just literally has in all caps 3 times at the very front page of their paper, it just says expletive, expletive, expletive. Literally expletive, 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 as they're trying to recount what actually happened during that play. But on the flip side, you've also got the Vikings quarterback, Case Keenum, who is a strong believer. And here's how he responded to the play in a post-game interview.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know right now. I have no words. You asked me about this moment. What this moment's meant to me is probably going to go down as the 3rd best moment of my life, behind giving my life to Jesus Christ, marrying my wife, and this one's right there close.
What a beautiful testimony to be able to hear. You are literally having one of the greatest moments of your life, and just a creative, also a winsome and a humble way to be able to give glory to God in that moment. I was struck by the humility. I was struck by just the kind of the winsome nature of Case Keenum, but also at the end of the day, there was that excellent play that he had. You know, it's one thing to be able to give glory to God in all situations and circumstances. And I think that's what we see clear throughout the biblical narrative, is that need to be able to do that. That's what Peter is going to tell the individuals that are with ears to hear, that are listening to him, as he is trying to recount what's going to happen. Specifically, is what he says in 1 Peter 4, the fiery ordeal that will come upon them. But before that, he says in 1 Peter 3 to be able to revere Christ in your hearts and to be able to give a response for the hope that's within you. That Paul is going to tell young Timothy to be prepared in season and out to give a response for the hope that's within him, to preach the gospel in season and out. And there's always just this need to give a response that even Jesus is going to say, let your light shine before men so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. When Case Keenum had the world watching him after a significant play, after one of the best plays that we'll see in the NFL, at that moment, Case Keenum, in a winsome but also a personable and humbling fashion, was able to give glory to his God. And we can all rejoice in that kind of excellence, but that ultimately pointed to our excellent Savior in Christ Jesus. What a lesson to learn, and also something just to be enveloped in and capture in the moment. And so that was kind of a recap of the weekend, but we are so excited after we take one of these commercial breaks. When we come back, we're going to have Bunni Pounds on. She is running for the Congressional District, the 5th Congressional District of the U.S. House, and you are going to want to hear from her as well, as we continue to hear more, not only about her, but also about what are some of the positions and the platform by which she's going to run on. So if you're more interested in hearing from her or kind of reading up on her before we interview her, you can go over to the Point of View website at pointofview.net to be able to read up a little bit on her before we have her in studio here in the next few minutes. And we'll also be taking your phone calls as well as sharing some of your Facebook comments and messages as well. So you can use the texting machine and call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can jump over to the Point of View Facebook page at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Though I should warn you, seeing as I'm a millennial, this could be a trigger warning that if you go over to Facebook, you're going to probably have to see my face. And I apologize for that greatly. It's been known to break cameras, but nevertheless, you can hop over there and then just scroll down a little bit to where you don't have to see me, leave a comment or message, and we will share that on air as we talk to Bunni here in the next few moments. So you're going to want to stick around, because this is going to be, this is phenomenal, and it's going to be a great little interview. So again, that phone number is 800-351-1212, or hop on over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And we will be back with Bunni Pounds right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
As last year was ending and this year was beginning, we've seen tumult in Tehran. While Iranians have been protesting in the streets, there is another important story that is being missed. Mark Howard, writing in the Gospel Coalition, says that the story can be summarized in 2 sentences. Persecution threatened to wipe out Iran's tiny church. Instead, the church in Iran has become the fastest growing in the world, and it is influencing the region for Christ. This is an incredible story. When the Iranian Revolution took place in the late 1970s, Christians faced persecution from the militant Muslim leaders. Bibles were banned and missionaries were kicked out of the country. Many feared that might be the end of the tiny Iranian church. Michael Brown compares it to the fears Christians had when China closed its doors behind the bamboo curtain and began persecuting Christians. But instead of that being the end of Christianity in China, just the opposite happened. Millions of Chinese people became Christians. Something similar has happened in Iran. More Iranians have become Christians in the last 20 years than in the previous 13 centuries. Operation World named Iran as having the fastest growing evangelical church in the world. Also, I might mention that they believe that the second fastest growing church is in Afghanistan. Why is the church in Iran growing so fast? Well, first, the violence done in the name of Islam has caused widespread disillusionment with Islam itself and the Iranian regime. Second, bold Iranian Christians are proclaiming the gospel to their fellow citizens and giving hope in the midst of difficult circumstances. Although the press will cover the protests in the streets, I think the more important story is what is happening in the hearts of the Iranian people who are converting to Christ in record numbers. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts on this January 15, 2018 day. Happy Martin Luther King Day. We are so excited that you have decided to join us here today, and we've also got a special guest in studio today. We've got Bunni Pounds here. Bunny, so great to hear from you.
It is so wonderful to be here. I've been a huge fan of Point of View for so many years.
So very grateful. So for those listening, Bunny has co-founded and grown 2 successful small businesses with her husband, Tim. In 2015, she founded a third business, Bunni Pounds and Associates, and a company whose mission is to advance conservative candidates and office holders. And so in just over 2 years, she grew BP&A into a $500,000 business with 9 employees serving 31 candidates at the federal, state, and county level. But now she is not just going to be one that's advocating for conservative candidates. She herself is a conservative candidate that's running for the 5th Congressional District race here in the Dallas area. So, Bunny, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've gone over to the dark side to be the candidate, from the consultant to the candidate. I married my best friend after graduating from Bible college when I was 21, and started my husband started a Bluebonnet Pest Control. We built that pest control company up to $750,000 and 15 employees in about 6 years. Sold that in 2001. Got into the restaurant business. Had 2 franchises, Roly Poly Sandwiches, if you've ever eaten off Mockingbird Lane.
Delicious.
Tim still manages and operates and owns that store, but we cut our teeth on small business, paying paychecks, making sure we create jobs, learning how to be leaders, learning how to staff restaurants and small business. And so I caught the political bug, listening to talk radio. Became a huge Laura Ingraham fan, and I listened to Marlon Maddox back in the day, and just had a passion to want to do something for America, to be a voice. And so I went to my first state convention and got hooked on the idea that I, as an individual activist, could make a difference. And I became a precinct chair, started putting out Jeb Hensarling yard signs all over Garland, and became, somebody that just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to, as a homeschooling mom, I decided to go back to college at Dallas Baptist. 3.5 years later, finished my political science degree. It was like, he who endures to the end shall be saved, right?
Amen.
And it just wanted to be somebody that could make a difference, wanted to make sure our Christian values were communicated, that we didn't just sit on the sidelines as believers, but really made a difference. And as Providence would have it, I had to become an intern my last semester at DBU. And I ended up as an intern at Congressman Jeb Hensarling's office. And he has always been one of my heroes, fighting for taxpayers and against federal encroachment. And so he hired me, 3 months later to be his campaign manager. Wow. And for a decade, I've been able to serve the 5th District of Texas and to serve these beautiful people all over 7 counties for him as his political consultant and, attending grassroots events when he wasn't able to come. And then 2.5 years ago, he said, Bunny, have you thought that the conservative movement might need you in a greater capacity? And I said, no, sir. Never considered that. I'm very happy serving you. And he said, I think you need to expand, take some more clients, do something different. And that led, I think in his mind, he thought, we're going to just take a few extra elected officials and help them raise some money and consult and help them win. That turned into 31 clients in 2.5 years. And the joy of my heart in that whole adventure the last few years is to raise up young people and raise up leaders, even within my own firm, that can take the conservative message and really change the world. And we always say that we're servant leaders, being kind and serving our clients and making sure that their voices are heard to the greatest capacity.
That's phenomenal. So it seems as though like you have been an individual that's not only signed the front of paychecks, but also the back of paychecks as well. And so you know what it's like. You're living and moving in a world where there's just a significant amount of regulation. But I guess if in recent days we've seen deregulation really become one of those prime characteristics of the Trump administration. But for every regulation that's been signed, there's been 23 that have been taken off the books. Yep. And so you're understanding you've come from the business background component, and now you've used your rights, but now you're really asking that question: what is your duty to your country? And it seems as though that the answer to that question at this particular season is it's time to run for office.
Well, yeah, I never saw this coming ever, but when Congressman Hensarling announced his retirement, there was such a need to make sure that taxpayers were defended, to make sure that we had a strong voice in Washington. I wanted his legacy to continue. He's always been one that has not been afraid to fight and to take the hard votes and to fight against Dodd-Frank and to believe that some of these national bureaucracies need to be reformed, that we need to do something different. We wouldn't have an earmark moratorium in the Republican caucus if it wasn't for Congressman Hensarling. Wow. I mean, he stood up for years and years and said, let's just do something different. And in that aspect, we needed somebody that was a fighter. And I felt like we didn't have that in the field currently. And so I decided to step up, and it went from a need to a calling. Wow. To go, let's do something different. Let's be a voice.
That's phenomenal. So again, for our listeners, this is Bunni Pounds. She's running for the 5th Congressional District race in the U.S. Congress. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. You can hop on over to the Point of View website as well to be able to find out more information to her, as well as to her website, and as well as just some of the platforms and positions. Or you can share your comments on Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio, and we'll be able to share those online as well. But I guess, Bunny, one of the things that I'm really interested in, especially when I saw on your website, is you're wanting to organize your candidacy really around 3 particular issues, or I guess 3 ideas. Share that with our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a solid voice for the unborn. As believers, we know that if we live in a culture of life, that changes America. If we don't value life from conception all the way to natural death, then what kind of country are we? Yeah. So that is a huge issue for me. One of my dear friends is Bob Hyde, Senator Henry Hyde's son. To make the Hyde Amendment permanent forever, where federal dollars never go to fund abortions ever again, is one of my top priorities. That's why I've got the endorsement of Texas Right to Life. I'm the only candidate in this race that has their endorsement and their belief. And that is a high honor for me to make sure that Planned Parenthood is not funded anymore. Those are the issues that I care about and that I fought for 20 years as a pro-life activist. From Bible college, standing out in front of, abortion clinics, to speaking on these issues for years and years. Those are things that are really important to me. Making sure that we have fiscal responsibility, that we continue to fight against government spending deficits. I mean, we have a moral issue in this country called the national debt.
Wow.
I mean, when we're over $20 trillion and growing, as we watch the clock you can go online and look at the national debt clock. It's unbelievable that we would be leaving these debts to our children and grandchildren. And my children are 21 and 19. They're incredible young men that love Jesus. But I do not want my future grandchildren being mortgaged out of everything with our national debt. So we have to make sure we don't become Greece. Those are issues. National security. As you know, that is the hot button issue of our day because it's the most important. The only thing in the Constitution that our federal government is supposed to care about is our safety and security. That is so important that we protect the people in the United States, that we continue to strengthen our military, that we take care of our heroes, our veterans, that we, build a wall.
Yeah.
Whether that's physical, virtual, however we do it, to protect the American people from terrorists that might come across our border. So those are the issues that the 5th District of Texas really cares about, and those are the issues that I think need to be communicated and continue to talk about.
That's phenomenal. So we've got Bunni Pounds, and we're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks here in the next little bit, but want you to know that you can call in and share any of your questions or comments that you have for Bunni. That number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. As well as on Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio. You can share your comments and questions, and we'll be sure to get those to her as well as get a response from her as well. And so we've got Bunni Pounds on. She's running for the 5th Congressional District race here in the Dallas area, representing 7 particular counties. And when we come back, we're going to continue to kind of expound a little bit more on those 3 really pillars of her campaign. The idea of a faithful witness, 2, the idea of wanting to move towards freedom, and continue to kind of live and move in a world in which we have the freedom not only to exercise our rights, but also figure out the question is, what is our particular duty to our country? And then 3, fiscal responsibility. What are some of those what are some of those measures that can be taken in order to alleviate the increasingly debt we're placing upon coming generations? And so when we come back, we're going to continue talking with Bunni, faith, freedom, and fiscal responsibility. And we'll be back right after this.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a Truth Team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View on this January 15th, 2018 day. We have in studio with us Bunni Pounds, who's running for the 5th Congressional District race here in the Dallas Dallas area. And Bunny's been telling us everything about kind of her background as well as some of the issues that she's been kind of dealing with and really passionate about on the campaign trail. Just to get a little bit of background on Bunny really quickly, age 29, enrolled in an American government class at Dallas Baptist University, and I'm highly biased about the Patriots, and so I want to continue to advocate for them. And after 3.5 years of night school, she graduated magna cum laude, the bachelor's degree in political science, and was also immediately hired to serve as Congressman Jeff Hensarling's campaign manager. In that capacity, she traveled the district for over 8 years, building deep relationships with the people of the 5th Congressional District. So she's got a background in this Congressional District, serving alongside Congressman Hensarling. Congressman Hensarling obviously decided that this will be his last term as well. And so with that, with his retirement, Bunny has decided that she is going to run for that race. And so, Bunny, how's it been going? Especially from some of the press releases, it seems as though you've got some momentum in the race right now.
It's been the most humbling experience of my life. To have, as you could imagine, to have your former boss say that you will save his liberty and the liberty of the American people. That's been incredible to have Congressman Hensarling's endorsement and support. Also having former Senator Phil Gramm, who's a solid voice for the fiscal responsibility in government, to endorse me has been amazing. Kelly Shackelford, just talked to Kelly this weekend, and he is behind our campaign. I'm so thankful for his endorsement. Alan West issued a statement of consideration to tell people what a person of character and integrity I am and how he believes in me for national security issues, which is so humbling. So I think we're the only ones, at least on our website at bunnypounds.com, that people can see all of our endorsements throughout all 7 counties. Solid conservative voices like Texas Eagle Forum's president, Tracy Bradford, and our former president, Kathy Adams. It's just been humbling. And for Texas Right to Life to put their seal of approval on me as their candidate has been very humbling, to say the least.
That's phenomenal. So not only so Bunny's got a lot of momentum right now, kind of with just the individuals that are supporting her. So not only is her boss, her former boss, Jeb Hensarling, the individual that's retiring from this particular seat, has endorsed her. Also, former Senator Phil Gramm here in Texas. And then an individual that's very much familiar with us to this show, Kelly Shackelford of the First Liberty Institute. There really is an institution that's dedicated to the protection of religious liberty, which is, again, one of the issues that Bunny is very passionate about. And then also very kind of interesting, especially with regards to what you said earlier, is Colonel Alan West as well. Because, again, you're running against, there's some veterans that are also in the field. But the fact that a former military man would come and endorse you really speaks to kind of some of your passion for veterans as well as for military matters as well.
Yeah, my father was a veteran during the Vietnam War. He was a white coat medic, and he actually became born again in the Army. He was watching Billy Graham on TV one day and gave his heart and life to Jesus.
Wow.
And that's actually how I got my name. I'm having more questions about my name than anything else on this campaign trail. Bunny is my real name.
Okay.
My dad got saved watching Billy Graham, and one of Billy Graham's daughters nicknamed Bunny, and he thought that was the coolest thing. And so he held on to that and named me Bunny, and my sister's name is Sunny. Maybe she's listening right now. But the reality is we have to continue to uphold our heroes, our veterans. Our veterans are our heroes. They have laid down their lives for this country. They have put their life on the line. And that would be a huge priority for me. Congressman Hensarling's always been amazing taking care of the cases for our veterans and making sure they're top priority. And that has to continue to be something that we hold dear and make sure that we always do.
Yeah. So I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So veterans were very much something I was very aware of growing up. And again, we look at the world situation right now, and it's almost as in a sense we're on teetering edge right now, just because we're stretched pretty thin right now with Iraq, Afghanistan, the looming threat relative to North Korea that's happening right now, as well as just some of the advances that China is making in the South China Sea. So, but then we also have to recognize that we've got 1.3 million active military individuals, and then countless others are retiring. And we've all heard the news about everything that's happening relative to the Veterans Affairs, and how there's just a great need. There's great opportunity. I guess
there's great opportunity. In East Texas, we have a problem where it is a long commute to get to the VA hospital in Dallas for a lot of our veterans in Palestine or Athens or Mineola. So to give them the opportunity to be able to go to their own doctors and for us actually to fund the full bill would be incredibly important for them. So we have to just think outside the box. How can we use free market principles, even when it pertains to veteran affairs, and making sure these guys are taken care of?
And you've
women,
and you have very much benefit. You've been very acquainted with that system. Again, running businesses, also really do seeing a need within the marketplace and trying to respond to that need with a particular service or product. So this is something that you've been used to. You've got background in understanding what are some of the opportunities that are available, and then how can we meet those needs in creative fashions in order that everyone might prosper.
Yes.
But especially our veterans, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important.
Okay, so let's touch on some of those other pillars, right? So we've got the freedom we talked about a little bit, especially with our individuals that we're the home of the brave because we're the home of the free because of the brave. And then we've got the faith component. You've got the backing of Kelly Shackelford, and about how there's a need today, really, wouldn't you say so, for individuals to stand up and to protect our First and Second Amendment rights that give us those freedoms?
Absolutely. Me and my husband have the opportunity to minister and pastor a small church, and we've done that for the last 8 years. And it's really incredibly important for our pastors and our leaders to be able to have the freedom to say what they feel is biblical principles, to not be afraid of the federal government coming in and shutting them down. I mean, we're seeing that in case after case after case right now. So making sure that those protections continue to stay in place, that we do not encroach on freedom of speech, especially for believers.
Yeah.
You know, we are politically incorrect, right? To actually say what we actually think and what the Bible actually says. So those issues are very, very, very important to me.
Yeah, and I think our founders were just so keen to be able to give us some of those freedoms because of what they recognized is the idea that if religious individuals, typically, especially churches, tend to produce virtue, and virtue is always a good ally of a limited government. But because, for example, when you've got virtuous people, you don't need as many police officers. When you've got virtuous people, you don't need as many caseworkers.
Exactly.
Because you have religious individuals. And so it's increasingly important in our world today for religious individuals and entities to be able to speak out and inculcate those ideas in order that we might be able to have a flourishment happening in all the spheres. And so you're fighting for those, correct?
Well, and all throughout U.S. history, we saw the importance of the clergy. Even during the Revolutionary War, the clergy speaking out for freedom. That is so important. The other thing we have to do is make sure that people that have our worldview and values are protected, whether they're pharmaceutical techs, whether they are justices of the peaces in Dallas that only want to do traditional marriage. Those are all of those aspects. People have an individual right for their religious freedoms and their liberties, and we have to make sure those are protected.
Yeah, so it's not just a Sunday thing. It's not just a Wednesday night thing. It's a 7-day-a-week thing for you.
Right.
Yeah.
We live out our faith every day, and regardless of what fields we're in. So those values and beliefs blend into everything that we're doing, and they have to be protected.
That's great. That's great. So Bunni Pounds, again, she is running for the 5th Congressional District that's being vacated, that seat by Jeb Hensarling. Bunni also has the endorsement of Jeb Hensarling, as well as Phil Graham and now Kelly Shackelford, and Alan West has voiced his support for Bunni. And so, Bunni, with these last few minutes, last minute, tell us something about yourself. What would you want the listeners to know about you?
I want them to know that I understand the 5th District of Texas. These people are the most beautiful people on earth. I do say I'm running to represent the most beautiful people on earth. That I'm the everyday woman that understands that my premium for health insurance is more than my mortgage. I understand the idea of trying to figure out how to pay for education, how to figure out how to make our personal budgets work. And thank God for tax reform, that the GOP actually got tax reform through, and then I'm going to save money and they're going to save money. So as the everyday woman that understands the the things that we all struggle with, how do we implement that into public policy that can make a difference for the average American? And at the end of the day, freedom and liberty is what helps the American public. Not the government taking more of our money. We should be able to give more of our money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell liberals, if you want to give more money and take care of people, please do. Do it through nonprofits, do it through churches, but you don't have to do it through the federal government. So those are the things that are so important for people to know.
That's phenomenal. And this has been Bunni Pounds. You can find out more information on Bunni at bunnipounds.com. You can hop on over to the Point of View website as well to find out more information. And Bunni, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Oscar Rodriguez is a decorated Air Force veteran who retired in 2013 after 33 years of service. Oscar was invited by Air Force Master Sergeant Chuck Roberson to give a flag-folding speech at Roberson's military retirement ceremony, something he's done over 100 times. Oscar agreed to give his stirring and patriotic speech, but the Air Force unit commander at Chuck's base presented a problem. Oscar's flag-folding speech included the word God. First, the unit commander tried to prevent Oscar from even attending the ceremony. When he was informed that he could not legally prevent his attendance, he told Chuck that Oscar could not give the speech. But like any good airman, Oscar was not going to abandon his wingman. He decided to give the speech anyway. And as a private citizen, Oscar is no longer subject to the commander's authority. But when Oscar stood to deliver the speech during the retirement ceremony, 4 senior airmen approached him, assaulted him, and physically dragged him out of the retirement ceremony before he even had a chance to say the word God. The government has no right to throw a citizen, much less a 33-year veteran, off of a military base because they don't want him to mention the word God. The Air Force broke the law and abused its power, discriminating against Oscar and service members everywhere who want to mention God in their private retirement ceremony. First Liberty Institute represents Oscar because no one should be assaulted for mentioning the name God. To learn how First Liberty Institute is defending religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back on Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and you were listening in on January 15, 2018, the Martin Luther King edition of Point of View. And we just had Bunni Pounds in studio. Bunni Pounds is running for the 5th Congressional District. The seat is being vacated by Jeb Henserling, who Bunni served for 10 years as a campaign manager and a variety of other positions as well with him. And now when he vacated that seat, she has decided that she is going to run for that seat. And it is currently, she has got his endorsement as well as former Senator Phil Gramm. Colonel Allen West has spoken high words of her, as well as just as recently as this weekend, I believe that Kelly Shackelford has gone ahead and endorsed her. So we have provided information on Bunni Pounds on our Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, as well as on the website, pointofview.net. You can make your way over there. And we are listening to you on Facebook right now, and we recognize that there is a problem. Contra, we're not in Houston, but we are in Dallas, and there is a problem with the Facebook page. So we've gone ahead and posted a link where you can jump on over to the YouTube, because, again, there's a multitude of ways to be able to get out a message in the internet age of 2018. And so we've got a live feed on YouTube right now that you can watch us as well as listen to some comments. And just to show my ignorance, I recognize that there's actually a lot more. There's some questions that are coming in on the YouTube page that I didn't recognize as well. So we're going to take some of those questions right now. We've got especially Dennis over on the Facebook page has a very interesting point that I think will be important for us to kind of see the delineation between, because Dennis says, quote, "What about the wall of separation between church and state?" Now, obviously, Dennis is alluding to one of the components and one of the platform positions that Bunni Pounds is working and moving in specifically right now, specifically when she mentioned that she is going to be an advocate for faith and kind of that First Amendment right of the religious liberty component that we believe to be true. And this separation of church and state really it gained popularity, I guess you could say, in 1802 with Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Association that really did give that separation of church and state. But it goes even further back than that when it was originally created by Roger Williams. Roger Williams, I know you probably read Roger and thought about Roger for a little bit. Roger, 1634, he was an advocate, was the founder of Rhode Island, was a strong advocate for religious liberty, but specifically he gave kind of the word that he used is soul liberty, and soul, this idea you want to have the freedom and propensity to be able to choose whichever religion that you might have. But what's fascinating is when Roger Williams and again Thomas Jefferson utilized this, it really was, they used this beautiful illustration between the church and the state, and they likened the church to a garden and the state to the wilderness. And so what Williams was advocating for, and really what Thomas Jefferson re-upped in his letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, is the idea that there would be a wall to keep the state from encroaching on the church. Now, this is a significantly important point for us to understand, because we've seen the reverse of it in today. When Williams originated this phrase and Thomas Jefferson re-upped it, the idea was to keep the state from encroaching on the church. That's why there was the wall of separation. Well, what do we have today? Well, what we have today for individuals is that many would say that the wall of separation needs to keep the church out of the state and not necessarily the state out of the church. You see how it's been flipped? Because in today's culture, what we continue to see is that there's this hostility towards the cause of Christ, to working out your religious liberty in your various spheres of influence all 7 days of the week. But when Williams and again when Jefferson utilized it, the goal was never to keep the church out of the state, but rather to keep the state out of the church. What both Williams as well as Jefferson, and even what George Washington said when he likened religion and morality to the pillars and foundations upon which this society would flourish, is they understood that individuals exercising their religion was a good ally for a limited government. They recognize the truth that when individuals are exercising their religion and have the freedom to be able to be religious or not be religious, to be Islam, to be a Muslim, to be a Christian, to be a Buddhist, to be a Hindu, what have you, whenever they're exercising that religion, it typically tends to produce virtue in people, and virtue is a good thing. Virtue is a good quality to have, especially for a country that was founded on the radical premise that the government would not be the encroaching upon us, would rather we would have freedoms that were inalienable to us. Because you see, before the U.S. American experiment, we could almost liken it to an island that's surrounded by water. Before, up until the U.S., the idea was that government would be the water, and the people would be the island, and they would be limited in what they could do. Well, the radical difference the U.S. experiment is that the government is the island and the people are the water with unlimited freedoms. It radically changed that. And so when you have these people that have radical freedom, what Descartes would say is that with great freedom comes great responsibility. And so what did our founders do? Is our founders gave us this beautiful understanding, not only to be able to have this freedom, but also to give freedom to the religious liberty components, because when you have individuals that have the freedom to exercise their religion, it produces this virtue, which is a good thing to have. And so I hope you can see the difference between, again, what's being used today and what was originally set forward by Roger Williams in the 17th century, as well as Thomas Jefferson and our countless other of our founders. The goal was never to keep religion out of the state. Rather, the goal was to keep the state out of religion, to allow it to be the pure garden in order that you might be able to see the beauty of the flowers give forth. Because, again, we wanted to give the freedom. I guess if the founders believed it to be true, they wanted to give individuals the freedom to pursue, and if I give a historical lesson, more philosophical, to give the individuals the freedom to be able to pursue that which is the three transcendentals, which were truth, beauty, and goodness. To give them the freedom to be able to see the needs in society and to meet those particular needs with their individual unique skill set. The goal was never to keep religion out of the state. The goal was to keep the state out of religion in order that the garden might be undefiled. So that again, what James would say in James 1:27, that pure and undefiled religion is this: to visit the foreigner, to visit the orphan and the widow, and to stain the world with the love of Christ. Such a beautiful opportunity that we have today, right? To the opportunity, because we're recognizing that it seems as though there's great hostility towards the church, right? We think about it, we changed quite a bit within just even my generation, but even more specifically within the past 50 years. That 50 years that the church used to be central to the culture, where Billy Graham was one of the most admired men according to Time magazine. There were things like blue laws, morality and kind of religion in the church was really central to culture. Then about 30 years ago, we started to see the church being seen as kind of on the periphery of culture. You have your way, I have my way. You can go to church if you like. I'm not going to go to church, but you can go to church. An indifference. To now what we're seeing is kind of a hostility towards the culture. Increasingly, individuals, or what Dawkins would say, that religion is a virus on the software of humanity that must be expunged. Individuals like Frank Bruni out of the New York Times would say a couple of years ago that they will be forced to believe kind of the cultural sexual ethic, individuals that are increasingly hostile towards the religious audiences. But even though there's that hostility, even though there's almost like there's a sense that they're antagonistic towards religious individuals, there's the inclination within many of us to want, or I guess some of us, I should say, some of us to play that we are victims of the culture. But the reality of the matter is, what the biblical narrative sets forth is, we are not victims, but we are victors in Christ. He is always leading us in victory and calls us to be a fragrant aroma of him in the circles and spheres in which we live and move. And so though the culture might be hostile to the claims of Christ, they are increasingly receptive towards the love and good deeds of Christ. And it's incumbent upon us, when the culture wants to continue to separate us from the world, not necessarily to be separate and distinct, but also to stain the world with the love of God. To what Jesus said, he did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And may we echo that call today. We'll be back right after this.
What difference does it make when you support Point of View? For Lee Weaver and his family, it meant doing something to reach out to women in need, and so far, to help bring nearly 5,000 babies into the world.
As a family, we were sitting around the dinner table. Our older daughter said, "Dad, we need to do something about it." And that kind of struck a chord in our family. All of that started out of Point of View and the effect it had on our conversations and our heart, leading us into don't be hearers only, but doers of the word. Point of View has always been real supporters of the concept that we're a small part of.
Your support of Point of View inspires people to do great things. You partner in spreading truth around the world. But the only way to make that happen is for you to make the call or visit us online and join the Truth Team. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Do it now. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View Radio on this January 15, 2018 day. My name is Nick Pitts, and you have been listening to Point of View. If you were joining us for the first hour, you heard quite a bit of show. We talked about everything from the Vikings, stunning win, to say the very least, last night, to we had Bunni Pounds in studio. Bunni is running for the Congressional District seat number 5 here out of Texas, and she is going to fill the seat that's being vacated right now by Jeb Henserling. She worked with Jeb for the past 10 years and served in a variety of capacities, as well as has received his endorsement. And so she has found herself kind of in the primary position right now, fighting her way to be able to win the primary spot on the Republican side and then to go up against whoever the Democrat would be in the November election. So we talked with her for a little bit about faith, family, freedom, as well as physical responsibility as well. And so we shared some of that with her. And then we also talked a little bit about the delineation that needs to be made relative to the separation of the church and state. How for so long there's been, throughout the history, the idea has been, dating all the way back to the 17th century, the idea has been not necessarily to allow this, the separation of church and state was to keep the state from encroaching on the church, whereas today it's being seen as the idea of the church not having a wall to keep them from being able to infiltrate and to be able to bless and to be able to mix and mingle in the state. And that's never been the extent. That's not intellectually honest, I guess we could say, to understand the role of the church in the society and sphere. And so we've got a great second half of the show for you. We've got everything from, we're going to be talking about DACA to what's the latest on this bill. We've got a looming government shutdown that's going to happen on Friday. Well, hopefully we'll be able to pass, at the very least, a continuing resolution. But my goodness, wouldn't it be something beautiful to actually get a full bill passed to where we actually have a budget for the upcoming year instead of just kicking the can down the proverbial road. And then we'll also be talking about this interesting article that I found out. It was actually in Tech Times, but it was a part of a scientific study that there's a group of scientists now that are working to be able to come up with an algorithm to interpret your dog's barking. What does that say about our need to be able to connect with our animals, as well as just the innate desire within us to connect with individuals in any capacity or form? But please know that we're going to be taking your phone calls. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. We're also going to jump over on Facebook as well. And we'll be taking some of your comments on Facebook at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. But please know we are keenly aware that our Facebook video feed is not working right now. I guess you could say it's because of some of the changes that have been happening on Facebook. No, I'm just kidding. The Facebook feed is just not working right now. But one of the good things that is working is our YouTube channel, which you can unfortunately but fortunately see me on the YouTube page as well. So you can jump over to, again, the Facebook link. The YouTube link is on the Facebook. So I'm just trying to make it as difficult as possible for you to be able to tune in and listen in on what I think is going to be a very great second hour of Point of View Radio. And so just to show that we are taking comments and questions, the separation of church and state was from Dennis on YouTube, and we also have Jay that's listening in from Columbus, Ohio. So Jay, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I was actually in Columbus yesterday on the way back from Boston. Had to stop in the Columbus airport and ate some chips and salsa at the Chili's too while I was there, and was watching a little bit of football. I was watching the end of the Steelers game while I was on my break, I guess you could say, the layover component. And so it's the second time I've ate at that Chili's, and I'm always grateful for what's happening in Columbus and have a greater appreciation for you all to be able to brave those cold weather elements. So I'm just assuming that everyone north of the Mason-Dixon line, especially during winter, is much stronger than myself. So without further ado, we are going to kind of jump back into it on some of the immigration issues. And so immigration has definitely been one of the talk of the town up in Washington right now, relative to specifically the DACA legislation that continues we're coming up, encroaching upon that deadline where it could potentially be expired. But there's been so many other issues that have come along, I guess you could say talking points, that have really distracted us from which is the news, which is the most significant pressing issue, which is the expiration of DACA. And so President Trump, with the quiet but strong support of congressional Republican leaders, has rejected the lone bipartisan proposal on the table to address the expiring Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Republicans fully plan to move forward on a short-term funding bill without a DACA deal or resolution. There were some that were advocating, because we know that the government is going to shut down because the continuing resolution that was passed earlier or at the end of last year is coming to an expiration this year. And so there were some that were trying to tie these two entities together, the continuing resolution to fund the government, as well as the DACA to continue to allow these individuals that have come here on no volition of their own, but simply because of their parents bringing them over here. They tried to tie those two entities together. Well, what's happened is that there's some on both sides that have decided that that's not prudent, nor is that right. And so now we're in I guess you could say, a pickle, to say the very least. Democrats are working behind the scenes to create momentum behind the proposal rejected by the president. The discussions internally and the phone calls throughout the week have turned to whether or not having a shutdown moment is where they want to be in this point in 2018. So we have essentially 5 days until the government runs out of money on Friday to fully operate, and what we continue to hear is there are more questions than answers are what we're being put forward. The idea of not being able to come up with a funding bill that lasts longer than 2 weeks to 2 months is just we're seeing the unintended consequences aren't necessarily making news. One of the issues that I continue to press on, especially when given the opportunity, is the idea that think about it from just a home economic position. That many of you have budgets set in place because you have anticipated amount you just have limited means. We all have a fixed particular income, and we're budgeting our dollars in order to be able to meet the needs that we're going to have throughout the year. We obviously budget a little bit more during December because we know that there's going to be more costs that are coming in relative to purchasing gifts, relative to decorating, relative to the sheer amount of the grocery budget that inevitably will go up during December. But we're anticipating that at the very forefront. Well, consider the U.S. government budget. There are various entities and organizations that are vying for those dollars and that are in need of understanding how much money they're going to have throughout the year so that they can make those planned expenditures as well. But what about our military, for example? Yes and amen. We need to support our troops, the 1.3 million active military members, and we need to, especially those troops that are over on foreign soil right now, we need to provide them with the very best because they are giving us their very all to be able to protect this home of the brave and because the home of the free because of the brave. We need to be able to protect them and need to be able to support them. But those individuals that aren't on foreign soil right now, you have many military bases that are in less than desirable conditions because they haven't been able to have a full budget year to be able to anticipate those needs they'll have throughout the year and then provide those renovations that are so desperately needed on some of these military bases. But without a full year of budgetary of understanding what's going to be coming throughout the year, as we continue to kick the can, they can't make these measures because they don't know how much is going to be given to them just within that 2 month span. Things need to be done, and not just these 2 week measures. But what we continue to see is the 2 week measures are what we get. So I'd love to hear your point of view. You can call in 800-351-1212. as well as join us on Facebook. And when we come back, DACA.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
As last year was ending and this year was beginning, we've seen tumult in Tehran. While Iranians have been protesting in the streets, there is another important story that is being missed. Mark Howard, writing in the Gospel Coalition, says that the story can be summarized in 2 sentences. Persecution threatened to wipe out Iran's tiny church. Instead, the church in Iran has become the fastest growing in the world, and it is influencing the region for Christ. This is an incredible story. When the Iranian Revolution took place in the late 1970s, Christians faced persecution from the militant Muslim leaders. Bibles were banned and missionaries were kicked out of the country. Many feared that might be the end of the tiny Iranian church. Michael Brown compares it to the fears Christians had when China closed its doors behind the bamboo curtain and began persecuting Christians. But instead of that being the end of Christianity in China, just the opposite happened. Millions of Chinese people became Christians. Something similar has happened in Iran. More Iranians have become Christians in the last 20 years than in the previous 13 centuries. Operation World named Iran as having the fastest growing evangelical church in the world. Also, I might mention that they believe that the second fastest growing church is in Afghanistan. Why is the church in Iran growing so fast? Well, first, the violence done in the name of Islam has caused widespread disillusionment with Islam itself and the Iranian regime. Second, bold Iranian Christians are proclaiming the gospel to their fellow citizens and giving hope in the midst of difficult circumstances. Although the press will cover the protests in the streets, I think the more important story is what is happening in the hearts of the Iranian people who are converting to Christ in record numbers. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View Radio. I am Nick Pitts. I'm your host for the Point of View radio station today, January 15th, 2018. Happy Martin Luther King Day. We have been talking about DACA. What is it? What's the extent of it? Why is it in the news so much? And especially, I'm really interested in how can we think about a Christian solution to this? Is there a Christian solution? A Christian solution, because I know that there are a variety of different individuals that have a particular stance. And so let's just go over a broad overview. What is DACA? And before we do, please know that we are going to be taking your comments and questions as well. And so we'll be sharing some of those that are online right now, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. You can make your way over there. And even though our Facebook feed is not working right now, you can jump over to the YouTube link, which we've put on there as well. And it's live over on YouTube as well. Or you can just do the traditional call in as well and share your Facebook or share your comment or question that you might have on the phone calls. So 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. So let's kind of go over DACA. Let's go through some of the basic components of it. DACA is an executive action that was taken by President Barack Obama that allowed undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. under the age of 16 to apply for protection from deportation. After a background check, those individuals were able to get renewable 2-year permits to work and study in the U.S. as well. So this was an executive action that was taken by President Barack Obama. Well, what do we know about executive actions at the very forefront? We know that there's a temporal nature to them. That really executive actions can be it's just signing by one particular president, but it is. As one president can sign it, another president can rescind it. And so what has President Trump done? President Trump has decided that there needs to be something more substantive. There needs to be stability there. So he's calling on Congress to be able to put into action and make it more substantive as well as long lasting by making it legislation instead of just an executive action, which really can just change based upon who's in the presidency. If we're a land of laws, it makes sense not necessarily to be a land of executive actions that can change so quickly, but really to put it into legislative action. So, since it went into effect in 2012, scope and scale, roughly 800,000 people have been protected by the program, and roughly approximately 700,000, have active DACA protections in September when the Trump administration announced its end. What does it take to be eligible? Applicants who have arrived in the U.S. before the age of 16 have lived there since June 15th, 2007. They cannot have been older than 30 when the Department of Homeland Security enacted the policy in 2012. So, why is it ending? Like I said, conservatives longly disliked DACA, with the Trump administration pledging repeatedly during the campaign to rescind it. There is a component that the Trump campaign has continued to push this idea that immigration, there are parts of immigration that are necessarily allowing individuals that are kind of security threats to us. And so he's wanting to secure the borders, that whole America first mentality that he has. But how do you square that with the idea that we're a nation of immigrants? Our historical ethos has been that to give us you're tired, you're weak, you're hungry, because the beauty of America is that we're all coming from a variety of different backgrounds. And it really is this land of prosperity that has the propensity to be a synergetic force to use those that were those that were coming from less than means in order to allow them the freedom and opportunity to do something with their hands. And so claiming concerns in the administration's eyes, they want to immediately invalidate DACA altogether. The Trump said the program would be terminated within a 6-month window. That 6-month window, I believe it's set to expire on March 5th. And so the DHS office offered a 1-month window for all DACA holders whose permits are to expire before March 5th. More than 20,000 DACA holders were eligible for the renewal out of the 700,000 that we have right now, and did not get their permits extended, either by not applying or paying the $495 fee for having applications arrive late. So what is Congress doing right now? What's happening up on Capitol Hill, these individuals that we've elected to be our officials, to be our voice, specifically in the House of Representatives? What are they doing right now? Democrats have repeatedly called for Congress to vote on the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act is a bill from Senator Dick Durbin and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham that would essentially turn DACA into a formal legal program and offer those individuals an opportunity to become U.S. citizens over time. But most Republicans and the president have insisted that any bill to make DACA permanent must be paired with border security and other measures to deter illegal immigration. We know one of the things that was just a hallmark of the Trump campaign, and what we continued to hear from the Trump presidency, is the desire to build a wall, to build a big, beautiful wall. And if there's this DREAM Act to turn it in, one of the key components that the Trump administration and many that support the Trump administration want to see in this DACA bill that becomes a law is they want to see measures and money that's given to be able to provide the funds necessary to build a big, beautiful wall, as well as other security measures to make sure our borders are safe. Trump has pushed for several elements that Democrats have said were non-starters, including the White House priorities that have included changes to asylum, mandatory worker verification, and hardline immigration enforcement measures. You'll remember just even over the weekend that we had, or even right before the weekend on Friday, early on Thursday or Friday morning, I can't remember, that the Office of DHS had raids on 7-Elevens, and the 7-Elevens across the country. One, to be able to identify illegal immigrants, and two, to be able to identify employers that were hiring illegal immigrants. Trump has also repeatedly stated that he'll not back off the demand for funding his border wall, cutting into family-based migration, and ending the diversity visa lottery. When given the opportunity to be able to speak on this in a closed door, or I guess a session between bipartisan members of Congress, this is where I can't say the word because I'll get censored by our producer right now. He used an expletive word when describing them, according to many reports, that really has kind of, again, taken us off topic from what needs to be done, which not necessarily immigration reform needs to be done. So what does it think about? Let's think about this from a Christian perspective, shall we? I'm always reminded of a particular individual named Ittai the Gittite. Ittai the Gittite is in 2 Samuel 15. He had just come, when we find Ittai the Gittite, what we find is an individual that had just come to the city of David because David is ruling and reigning. But for those of you that are familiar with the biblical narrative, you would be reminded of the fact that in 2 Samuel 15, David is in the midst of a transition. He has the opportunity to lift his hand against his son, Absalom, who has been very much trying to steal the hearts of the men of the people of Israel. And then he can lift his hand against his son and strike him down, or he can allow his son Absalom to be able to take the throne. And what does David do? Instead of trying to kill his son in the uproar that the revolt that he's leading to take over the throne from David, David decides that he's going to leave the city. And when David leaves the city, we have this immigrant in Ittai the Gittite that's just arrived there with his family. And one of the fascinating things is David's leaving the city. Individuals are cursing David as he's exiting the city, but this immigrant that's just moved to the city, the sojourner, he says, I'm going to follow you. David says to him, you just got here. Yeah, to give Nick paraphrase, you just got here, settle with your family, don't move them. You've had this long, arduous journey. But one of the captivating things that I'm always taken by Ittai the Gittite is what he says specifically in verse 21, 2 Samuel 15, verse 21. He says, as the Lord lives, and as my Lord the King lives, wherever my Lord the King shall be, whether for death or for life, there also will be your servant. What we see with this sojourner that's just got to the city of David is the loyalty that he has to the king, that he wants to be loyal to him for the glory of God. This immigrant that we would consider an immigrant today and would technically be an immigrant back then, the loyalty that was for him because he had the opportunity to enter into the city of David, the loyalty to the throne, as well as the desire to make much of the glory of God. There's great value in immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. So how can we build out a system whereby where there's security measures that are put into place to keep terrorist activity from fostering as well as facilitating an environment where that there might be detriment to the American society? But also, how do we continue to stay true to who we've always been, which is just a nation that allows the weak and the weary to come and to find opportunity, to find rest, and to find the ability to be able to exercise their God-given gifts in such a way that they can meet the needs of our society today? Well, there's a Christian perspective to that I'd love to spell out with you, but we've got to take one of those commercial breaks. So be sure to tune back in with us after this commercial break. Or if you have a question or comment, go on. You can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can log on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and leave a question or comment, and we'll share those online. But when we come back after the break, we're going to dig into the biblical narrative and hopefully be able to delineate and identify a Christian understanding of immigration. Right after this.
If you've listened for any length of time, you've probably heard about Point of View listeners who've done amazing things, started ministries, found their life's calling, impacted their city, their state, the nation. But let me be clear, you don't have to have a huge impact to be faithful. I thought about that when I read a note from Joanne in Texas. She admitted, up until recently, I've not had much of a political view, nor have I ever been so informed. But since I signed up for your email and website information, I can now get the correct information that the public is oblivious to. Joanne ended by thanking us for the Take Action section of our website, where we make it easy for you to express your views on key issues with your elected representatives. Everything we do on the air, online, through mail and email is made possible through people like you who invest in Point of View so we can invest in issues that matter. Take your place on the Truth Team. Call 1-800-347-5151 or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, your host today on Point of View on this January 15th, 2018 day. We have been talking about immigration during the second hour of the program. During the first hour, we had everyone from Bunni Pounds, who's running for the 5th Congressional District seat that's being vacated by Jeb Henseling during the first hour. And we've got some of her information that's on the Point of View website at pointofview.net, as well as just the stunning victory by the Vikings and just a variety of other issues we were talking about, especially the delineation between church and state during the first hour. But the second hour, we've really given attention on the looming DACA expiration and how members of our congressional elected officials are vying or trying to be able to come up with an ability, a way to be able to find a viable path to citizenship, but also what to do with these individuals that are kind of receiving some of the DACA protections that was established by President Obama in 2012 through an executive action, numbering probably around what we have is 800,000 individuals. And so what is a Christian perspective for this, for the individual that believes it to be true, that the word is a lamp unto our feet and a guide for our path? How are we to think about this from a biblical perspective? Well, here's a little bit of the numbers, which I find just fascinating because I'm a numbers guy. So I find these data points, these statistics to be very telling right now. So regarding Christians, according to one study, 9 in 10 want more border security. There's a desire for border security, 9 in 10, that's overwhelming number of individuals. But relative to a path for citizenship among self-identified Christians, it's 6 in 10. So around 60% want a path to citizenship. Relative viewing immigrants, 48% of Christians see them as a drain on economic resources. But probably one of the more telling statistics, especially, and I'll just call it for what it is, probably troubling statistics for me when I look at this, and what's really just very detrimental that I believe is what influences their beliefs on immigration. According to the Lifeway study poll, what influences self-identified Christians' belief on immigration issues? And only 10% of self-identified Christians believe that the Bible influences their beliefs on immigration. Now, again, hear me for a second. The Bible, which is the living and active Word of God, the Bible, which, again, it's not a policy book, but it does give us some principles and standards by which to help understand and see our response in the world. Only 1 in 10 in them would say that they have been influenced by the biblical narrative relative to the immigration issue, which is just stunning when you think about it. So let's think about the scope of immigration, not necessarily DACA, because DACA is only around 900,000 individuals. Let's think about the scope of the immigration issue as a whole. So there are 42.4 million immigrants here in the U.S. That's about 13.3% of the population. In 1890, that number was 14.8%. And in 1970, that number had a significant dip just because of some other forces that were at play. It was only 4.7%. Mexicans are by far the largest contingent at 28%. And that 36.7 million are above the age of 25 years old. Here's what's fascinating. So of the immigrants, again, the 42 million immigrants, that's including both illegal as well as legal as well. So illegal, best number we have is anywhere from 10 to 12 million illegal immigrants. And so there are other immigrants as well that have come over here through legal means as well. So here's what's fascinating. Again, 36 million are above the age of 25. But when it comes to college education, again, this is going to be staggering to you. 29% of immigrants have a degree. Relative to individuals that are native born, that number is 30%. There's really very little difference between the two. Maybe one of the more pressing stats, 17.5 million immigrants have children with at least one parent that's an immigrant. So there's a 17.5 million children that, again, if you were to deport all the illegal immigrants, that's a pretty significant chunk of children that are now have only one parent that's an immigrant, that would have one parent or no parents for that matter. Relative to unauthorized immigrants, there's 11.4 million, 4.1 million reside with an illegal immigrant. And just numbers of relative to deportations and apprehensions, there were 680,000 apprehensions in 2014. That in relative to deportations, there was 577,000 deportations. Much has been made about the individuals, about how President Obama in 2015, in calendar year 2015, deported more individuals than President Trump's first year as president. But it was not because of lack of trying. The courts just didn't move as quickly. So what is the impact of immigrants on the U.S.? Because, again, if we think about that statistic, that 48% of Christians believe it to be true, that immigrants are a drain on economic resources, is their perception reality? So let's think about the economic impact. 11.8 billion was paid in state and local taxes in 2012. and a sizable part of that was because of the immigrant population. When we think about it, immigrants are nearly twice as likely to be entrepreneurs in our system. They're the founders of 18% of the Fortune 500 companies, which is also a pretty telling statistic. When you think about it, the idea that they're a drain on our economy, but when in reality, 18% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants. An analysis of 2011 census data at the county level showed that there's no statistical significant relationship between unemployment and the presence of immigrants. What does that tell us? The idea that they're taking our jobs, quote unquote, is really a myth based upon the numbers. Again, this is 2011 census data at the county level. There's no statistical difference relative to unemployment and the presence of immigrants. And so what about the scriptures? Let's hone in. Let's get right to it, because we're going to be taking one of those breaks, but also let you know that we'll be also taking some of your phone calls as well. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And you can also leave a note or a question on the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We know that the feed is down right now on the Facebook, but you can log on over to the YouTube link, which we have right there. And on the YouTube link, you can actually see, unfortunately, you can see me, but you can hear what we're talking about as well. So let's think about it on the biblical side. Just some scriptures relative to immigrants. What does the biblical narrative speak to about immigrants? There is Exodus 22 that says, "You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." What Moses is trying to do within the Exodus component is to remind ourselves that we ourselves are all sojourners. We've all come here. This is not where we originated. When we look in Leviticus 19, quoting Leviticus 19, verse 33, "When a stranger sojourners with you in your land, you shall do him no wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you. You shall love him as you love yourself," which should be kind of perk up the ears to hear those who would be reminded of what Jesus told us in Matthew. Relative to Deuteronomy 10, which is really one of those passages that's often utilized in the political arguments, is the idea that God executes justice for the fatherless and the widow and, quote, loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. And then it says the command, "Love the sojourner. Therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." Again, in Zechariah, it says, "Don't oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner." And then even God's call in Malachi 3:5 about what God would do. God says, quote, "I will be a swift witness against those who thrust aside this sojourner." That's understanding of what the writer of Hebrews would say, to show hospitality to the strangers. It seems very clear that the biblical narrative has an emphasis. It wants to give emphasis to the relationship that Christians have with the sojourner, with the stranger, with the foreigner. But we also hear clearly in the biblical narrative a desire for protection. So the idea about walls, and many would use even Nehemiah, who was a man that built up walls. So he's building up walls. The book of Ezra is about people's response to the inadequacy of their area, especially compared to the former glory. This idea to, again, build up the walls, build up the security measures that have been put into place. In addition, the biblical narrative also teaches that we do not, quote, "move the ancient landmark that your fathers have set," in Proverbs 22:28 and again in 23:10. It's this understanding that even in the biblical narrative is testifying to an idea that there are borders, there are ancient landmarks. And so what are we to think about that? Well, let's fast forward, and we have what God thinks about the sojourners, that what we talked about in the beginning. 2, to what God thinks about walls and protection, especially for people. And then 3, let's think about authorities that have been put into place. Well, the classic passage that's often utilized is Romans 13. In Romans 13, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there's no authority except God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." And what he says to Titus, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities. And again in 1 Peter 2:13, "Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution." So how do we take all of those scriptures and then come up with these two particular political positions that have been put into place? Do we tear down the walls, or do we have to build bigger walls? Well, there's two approaches that have often been utilized by Christians, and we'll be talking about that right as soon as we get back from the break. But be sure to tune in, or you can call in as well, 800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Oscar Rodriguez is a decorated Air Force veteran who retired in 2013 after 33 years of service. Oscar was invited by Air Force Master Sergeant Chuck Roberson to give a flag-folding speech at Roberson's military retirement ceremony, something he's done over 100 times. Oscar agreed to give his stirring and patriotic speech, but the Air Force unit commander at Chuck's base presented a problem. Oscar's flag-folding speech included the word God. First, the unit commander tried to prevent Oscar from even attending the ceremony. When he was informed that he could not legally prevent his attendance, he told Chuck that Oscar could not give the speech. But like any good airman, Oscar was not going to abandon his wingman. He decided to give the speech anyway. And as a private citizen, Oscar is no longer subject to the commander's authority. But when Oscar stood to deliver the speech during the retirement ceremony, 4 senior airmen approached him, assaulted him, and physically dragged him out of the retirement ceremony before he even had a chance to say the word God. The government has no right to throw a citizen, much less a 33-year veteran, off of a military base because they don't want him to mention the word God. The Air Force broke the law and abused its power, discriminating against Oscar and service members everywhere who want to mention God in their private retirement ceremony. First Liberty Institute represents Oscar because no one should be assaulted for mentioning the name God. To learn how First Liberty Institute is defending religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View on this January 15, 2018 day. We've been talking about immigration, some of the DACA legislation that's being put up into place. That's the looming deadline is set to expire in March, and Congress right now is not only trying to figure out how they're going to fund the government past Friday, but also trying to figure out what they're going to do with the quote-unquote the dreamers, those individuals that have taken up the DACA protections that was put into place by President Obama back in 2012 through his executive action. And what are we to think about this from a Christian perspective as well as what we've been talking about right before the break, just kind of giving a litany of the biblical understanding of what does God think about the sojourner, what does God think about the stranger, what does God think about authority, what does God think about borders and wall. And what we continue to see is that this is a much more complex issue than it's made out to be. There are those that would call for building bigger walls and citing Nehemiah. They would cite the idea from Acts 17, the understanding that we have to continue to protect those that have been given to us from 1 Timothy 5, right? And submit to the institutions that have been put into place, to what Peter would say in 1 Peter 2 as well as in Romans 13. But then there are others that would, on the Christian perspective, would say that we need to be very preferential in our treatment towards immigrants. And they would cite Deuteronomy 10, they would cite Leviticus 19, they would even cite Matthew 25 and showing hospitality to strangers in Hebrews 13. So it seems as though both sides are kind of utilizing this argument. But there's actually names for these sides of the arguments that I think is going to be increasingly important for us to understand. There's the cosmopolitan approach. And the cosmopolitan approach understands the world as a coherent global society united by the simple fact of our common humanity, and often regarding the nation state as the impediment to international justice. This is going to be a side that's much more prone to want to give preferential treatment towards the foreigner and the widow and the orphan. This is going to be an individual, the stranger, I guess you could say, the sojourner, utilizing passages such as Exodus 23. They assert that as Christians, with regards to the immigrant, they're not to oppress the foreigner. They're to fight for justice for the foreigner, according to Malachi 3. They're to provide food for the foreigner in Leviticus 19. They're to invite them as you would invite Jesus in Matthew 25. They also employ the narrative of Job, calling to mind Job's hospitality towards the stranger in Job 31. Job's love is the same love that fulfills all the commandments in Galatians 5:14. That's more of a cosmopolitan approach that some have taken that's traditionally been identified as a Democratic position. And then there's the Republican position, or I guess positions that many Republicans would find kind of similarity with. And that's the communitarian position. The communitarian approach calls for individuals to embrace their moral duty, but there is a concurrent obligation to maintain our own societies as stable and well-governed. This is the understanding that, yes, the individual Christian is called to show hospitality from 1 Peter 4:9, to love and pray for their enemies, according to Matthew 5:44, to be a voice for the voiceless, according to Proverbs 31:8 and 9. But this response is the response of the individual and not the basis for public policy. Regardless of the Citizens United Supreme Court case back a couple of years back, the individual is different from the government. The government is tasked with restraining and punishing evil, according to Romans 13:4, to enacting justice, according to verse 5, to fostering an atmosphere of peace in 1 Timothy 2:2. Relative to the explicit admonitions concerning the foreigner that we kind of overlooked in the previous segment, America is not the Israel from the Old Testament, thus it's imprudent to impose those admonitions upon the United States. Contra, we are not the biblical city shining upon a hill. That's God's chosen people, though we are exceptional and have an exceptional responsibility with regards to the world. And so what does this, that still leaves us in this midst of this tension right now. What are we to do? Are we just build bigger walls, or are we to tear down those walls and provide a path for citizenship? What's increasingly important for us to understand is that this issue consists of something greater than opinion and worldview, but image bearers and family units. Some may argue that we should build bigger walls around our borders, but may those impenetrable forces not be around our hearts. We've been admonished to be hospitable, compelled to welcome the stranger. The evangelical of all people should be aware of the plight of the immigrant, for we were once strangers in a foreign land and are today strangers in a foreign land, according to 1 Peter. And to a certain extent, we increasingly are feeling like we are unwelcomed in this place because the reality that our earthly citizenship is nothing in comparison to our citizenship in heaven. And while we wait in this strange place, stewarding it well and manifesting a faithful presence here, we hope that what St. Augustine once said, that hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger that things are the way that they are, and courage to make them the way they ought to be. As we pray his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven, the evangelical should work heartily to make his kingdom come. And his kingdom is a place where justice always reigns, and strangers are continuously welcomed, and love never fails. Not forsaking one for the other, justice must be balanced with a welcoming hand and saturated in love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is listen to each other instead of talking at one another. And as Benjamin Franklin says, it's therefore that the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment and to pay more respect to the judgment of others. As we increasingly are finding ourselves trying to be forced to have to choose between building bigger walls or building or tearing down existing walls, let's not choose, but rather let's be that third option. Especially on this Martin Luther King Day, we should be reminded of what Martin Luther King said. that the church functions best not as a servant to the state, but as a conscience to the state. We're the moral barometers. We're the individuals that are willing to stand up and call wrong for wrong and right for right. And we can't be a servant to a political party or an ideology or position, but rather we're much better being issue people, to be champions for the foreigner, for the widow, for the orphan. But we should also be champions for wanting order, because we have a God of order. And we should be champions for the rule of law. And so there has to be a third option whereby we can be welcoming to the foreigner, to the widow, to the oppressed, but also recognize the truth that we need to have rules of law, order, stability within the American system, so that when they come here, everyone might be able to continue to experience the beautiful prosperity of this place, this beautiful place whereby freedom is in the air. And when there's freedom in the air, it allows individuals to freely utilize those inalienable talents and skills that the God of the universe has placed inside of them, in order that they might be able to meet the needs of the society in which we live. Increasingly, like I often say, we've been living in a world in which we're very quickly ready to exercise our rights, but very slowly to ask, what is our duty to our country? What is my country costing me as it has costed those that have come before me? How might I be able to answer the call, to do my duty to make our country all the more better? On this Martin Luther King Day, as we're reminded of the cost and the beautiful opportunity we have to be able to give voice to everything, I'm reminded of what the civil rights leader Rustin Byard would say. Rustin Byard said, "The way to reduce ugliness in the world is to reduce the ugliness in yourself." It's this beautiful opportunity that we have to be able to use our given talents and gifts in such a way that we might leverage it for a more prosperous nation. May we not give in to the question of having to choose between more security or give in to the question of wanting to be compassionate with less security. May we have a third option that says we want to be champions for security, but also champions of those that are trying to come here to build a better future, not only for themselves, but also our country as well. And that is my point of view. And I thank you so much for joining us on Point of View today. Be sure to check us out on our Facebook page at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We promise that the Facebook feed will be up sooner rather than later, as well as on our website, pointofview.net, where you can find more information on some of the resources that we have available. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I am Nick Pitts, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants